Privileged to be present here today at the third Counterterrorism Conference. I take this opportunity to extend my appreciation to the India Foundation for inviting me to this conference, and especially to this session, the role on international institutions in countering terrorism. During the course of this conference, we have heard that the Indian Ocean region is today the center stage of the global economy and is key to the strategic stability of the region, and that it is a veritable lifeline for international trade. It was only yesterday that the Honorable Minister from Jammu and Kashmir, Mr. Sajjad Lone, spoke at length about the huge dilemma that he once found himself in, and that he eventually made a difficult choice to tread the path for development. Perhaps it would be correct to say that development is a critical prerequisite in addressing the root causes of terrorism. Several speakers during the last 2 days have also emphasized on the importance of international and regional cooperation among states. That, I guess, would be the second prerequisite: cooperation between nations. Now, I'd briefly like to go, of the what we are discussing, and then mention that perhaps all of you would be aware that 4 days ago, on Monday, in fact, a oil tanker was hijacked off the coast of Somalia, flying Somali pirates. That's what has been said by the media. The oil tanker was bearing a Comoros flag. Comoros is a member of the IORA. It was off the Somali coast. In fact, we got some information from the office of the Prime Minister of Somalia, who had attended our summit in Jakarta last week. They're not very clear, but the fact remains that this is the first incident since 2012 of a boat being hijacked, which actually proves the very effective method that has been successful in the Indian Ocean region, which is the combined forces, the combined navies of various regions working together, a unified command, which has addressed the issue of piracy and also of hijacking quite effectively. And so this has come as a big shock, and how to address it, because even as of now, there are 11 sailors who have been incarcerated there by the dozen and odd people, Somalis, who have forcibly boarded the ship. The crew is in fact of Sri Lankan origin, yet another IORA member state. So it puts to question as to what we can do, what kind of cooperation can we do on the ground to see how we can address this. That said, I'd like to mention the core competence of IORA, which Ambassador Martin mentioned briefly. The IORA is essentially a developmental organization for regional economic cooperation in the Indian Ocean. Initially, it was called IOR-ARC, Indian Ocean Rim Association for Regional Cooperation, an extremely difficult acronym to expand. The genesis is based on Nelson Mandela's statement made in New Delhi when he visited India in 1994. He first said, and I quote, "The natural urge of the facts of history and geography should broaden itself to include the concept of an Indian Ocean rim for socio-economic cooperation and other peaceful endeavors, and recent changes in the international system demand that countries of the Indian Ocean shall become a single platform," unquote. That was the great Nelson Mandela in 1994 in New Delhi. It took a few years for officials to come together, especially 5 countries in the forefront, including India. And IORA was formally launched in March 1997 in Mauritius. The Secretariat of IORA is based in Mauritius. The membership today has grown to encompass 21 member states. Right from the west you have South Africa, and right up to the other side of the rim, which is Australia. 21 member states. Two notable exceptions are Pakistan and Myanmar. But I'm happy to inform you that Myanmar will be applying. The National Security Advisor of Myanmar was at the summit last week, and he will be applying for membership of IORA. Importantly, IORA also has 7 dialogue partners, which are China, France, Germany, Japan, UK, and USA. The interesting thing is that the IORA's charter very specifically limits its mandate to regional economic cooperation. That was how Nelson Mandela wanted the IORA to function, and that is how the charter has built an inbuilt, there is no window at all for interpretation. Therefore, there is no mandate for a political role or to go beyond economic regional cooperation. Terrorism is not new to IORA member states over the last 2 decades. In fact, the earliest bombings by Al-Qaeda in 1998 of the American embassies in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and Nairobi, Kenya, both of which are IORA member states, were perhaps the first examples of this terrorist group ever. The Indian Ocean has witnessed also piracy off the coast of Somalia, the Gulf of Aden, and the Arabian Sea, resulting from a combination of circumstances, including ethnic, language, and cultural diversities, arbitrary boundaries, ideological strife, and competition for scarce resources, especially water. It was the Somali piracy phenomenon that brought forth proactive steps on the part of IORA. In 2011, India became the chair of IORA, and it initiated steps to reprioritize the focus, with giving maritime safety and security top priority in order to counter piracy and terrorism. Over the years, IORA has also held numerous conferences to discuss what is important, but as was mentioned by the Home Minister of Singapore, Mr. Shanmugam, day before yesterday, what you bring, the deliverables that you place on the ground is what is important, what you try and put into practice, rather than discussions and conferences. Indonesia is the present chair of IORA, and last week it commemorated the 20th anniversary by organizing or hosting the first IORA summit in Jakarta on the 7th of March. Among the documents which were adopted, interestingly, was the IORA Declaration on Preventing and Countering Terrorism and Violent Extremism. It was the first time that IORA had almost, I believe, tried to step out of its mandate, if it goes by the wording of the declaration. IORA member states denounced terrorism, violent extremism in all its forms and manifestations, and resolved to work to support each other's efforts to counter the threat from this challenge. I am glad to inform you that in this regard, India undertook, it announced this proposal in Jakarta, in fact, during the summit, to reinforce cooperative mechanisms in maritime safety and security, such as white shipping agreements. I think it was mentioned this morning by our naval chief, by setting up an information fusion center for strengthening maritime domain awareness, and proposing to host such a center in the Indian Ocean rim for IORA member states. The IORA summit also adopted 2 other documents, which is the Concord and the Action Plan, which actually focuses specifically on cooperation in maritime safety and security through coordination and pooling of resources. Quite appropriately, the first summit had its theme, Strengthening Maritime Cooperation for a Peaceful, Stable, and Prosperous Indian Ocean. In fact, what IORA has also been trying to do, and I mentioned the Somali Prime Minister earlier in my speech, we've been trying to mainstream some of the countries, Somalia and Yemen. We've been trying to bring them on board to participate in our capacity building exercises with the specific idea of bringing them to sit with all the other member states of IORA to see how we can get them to work together, to learn from other states. It has been useful for us. We have a special Somalia-Yemen program in IORA, which has been quite successful, organizing events for these two countries in third countries. And there is a huge amount of interest by other countries to train Somalis and Yemenis. The G7 foreign ministers meeting in Germany in April 2015, and then again in Japan in 2016, both took cognizance of what was happening in the Indian Ocean and how to combat terror, and have tried to combine their resources with IORA. IORA has been invited to the G7 meetings, these last two G7 meetings. But as I mentioned, the fact that our mandate doesn't permit us to go beyond economic regional cooperation, I think forbids us to get into anything more solid. On the 12th of March 2015, Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, during his visit to Mauritius, remarked, I quote, Indian Ocean Rim Association can be an important instrument for pursuing our vision for a sustainable and prosperous future in the region. The time has come for a strong grouping around the Indian Ocean. We will pursue this with new vigor in the years ahead. We seek a future for Indian Ocean that lives up to the name of SAGAR, Security and Growth for All in the Region, also called SAGAR, unquote. I'd like to acknowledge the presence here of the former Prime Minister of Mauritius, Sir Anirudh Jagannath, who's attending this conference. He is presently the Minister for Defense and therefore also deals with this important subject. It's a big honor that he's present here in this conference. I had mentioned earlier about the mandate of IORA being limited to regional economic cooperation. But the fact that the recently concluded IORA summit has adopted a declaration on counter-terrorism could well be the seed for an expanded mandate. That would depend, of course, on whether the charter can be amended or not. Most members are quite reluctant to do so. IORA as a renewed and revitalized architecture which deals with regional economic development can be an instrument, but in its own limited way. There are other instruments which I think the other panelists here mentioned, which obviously has gets the political platform, which would be equally important, I presume. I would like to end with that, with the fond hope that we hope to organize a conference in Mauritius on the Indian Ocean, and we hope that India Foundation will be able to participate. I'll be discussing this proposal with Sir Anirudh Jagannath also later, and hopefully we'll be able to see many of you in Mauritius later on in the year. Thank you.